Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to FP1. Now in the last week I've been pretty busy with university work, but Formula 1 have been very busy designing their 2021 regulations, and we finally have a more accurate vision of what our cars could look like in a couple of years' time. So just a note before we start then, the images I'm about to show you are by no means a definite representation of what we will see in 2021. If you go back 12 months ago, we got our first sort of vision of it, and I'll put those up on the screen now. They look completely different, so things could still change. There's still a couple of months before the final regulations are laid out for teams in October, so lots could change here, especially the front wing, which we're going to start with in a minute. They have said that they're most likely going to change that before we see the final regulations. But let's talk about it anyway. We've got three elements there that all connect into the nose cone, which is quite interesting because obviously this year they come to a point just before the nose cone. Now, what I think this might be doing is to try and direct the air through the suspension into the floor, which is obviously where a lot of the downforce is going to be generated in a few years' time. Going back to ground effect aerodynamics, which we saw in the 70s with cars like the Lotus, that eventually got banned, actually, because it was too quick at that period to warrant the safety of the cars. So we're going back to it this year. It's going to be very interesting to see how the cars sort of line up with their modern-day counterparts and see if we can still hit those top speeds. We'll have to see. But yeah, very interesting front-wing design. I know a few people are slightly divided on that, say it looks a little bit too much like IndyCar, but as I said, this could still change, so don't worry too much about that. Now, moving further back then, a very interesting part of the car, which I don't think many people have talked about actually, these little flicks above the wheels. So they've come out the suspension arms, and they sort of cover the top of the wheel. Not too sure what these are for. At a guess, it might be to try and smoothen the airflow that's coming off the tyres. Obviously, these tyres are spinning, so when the air hits it, it creates quite turbulent vortices that will obviously disrupt cars behind. So I wonder if this is just to try and smoothen that air out. What I'm very interested to see here is how tight the regulations are with this part of the car. Now, I say that because if we can add things to these little tips, like let's say some vortex generators, that could be quite a big development race that we see at the start of 2021. If one team says, oh, okay, let's try and put a vortex generator onto the top here, try and direct some air back towards the rear of the car, that could give us quite a significant performance gain. You never know. Just touching on the wheels then, obviously we're 18-inch wheels. That is one thing that is confirmed for 2021, and I do like it. I think it looks really nice. Some people might say it looks a little bit off, but bear in mind this is a 50% scale model, so obviously it'll look a little bit bigger and gaps will be slightly larger. We've also got wheel covers on there, which is the first time we've seen them since 2009, I think. And again, so that's been quite decisive. Some people say they don't look the nicest things in the world in comparison to the sort of non-wheel covered wheels that we have at the moment. I don't mind them, I'll be honest. I think it could be very interesting to see what teams do in terms of the livery as well. If we go back to, say, Brawn, where they had that sort of neon yellow, that looked really, really good, I think, on that car. So I'm all for wheel covers. I think it'd be great. Now, going slightly further back, let's first talk about the side pod intake. So it looks a lot more aggressive, a lot more swept back than it does in at least in the current generation of Formula 1 cars. A little bit smaller as well, so I wonder if cooling could be maybe something to focus on. Obviously, teams like Mercedes have really struggled at points this year. Take Austria, for example, where they just couldn't get their cooling right. Could we see something similar this year if these engine intakes are obviously quite small? You never know. Now, looking towards the floor, then we also almost like a stepped floor. No barge boards, which is very interesting. But instead, we've got these tunnels that will take the air underneath the car, which is where all the magic will happen. So that'll be very interesting to see. Quite a tight package on this wind tunnel model. Obviously, teams will be able to package their car relatively freely, at least in Formula 1 terms. So I think the rear of the cars will look very, very different as you go across the grid. The halo, I have not mentioned that yet, looks very similar to this year. Obviously, if you look at the photos we saw again in September last year with the first sort of concepts that we had of these cars, the halos is a little bit different, a little bit more curved. I do think this looks quite nice, at least on this version of the car. Obviously, no halo would be ideal, but we're never going to go back to no halos now, especially after like that crash in, where was it? Belgium last year, where the halo actually proved it was useful. They will never go back. Now, I don't think they would have done that with or without that accident, but hey, what I do think we could now just use to improve the halo is something like an aero screen. We've seen IndyCar using that now. I might put a video out on that later on what that means for Formula 1 if that succeeds. But I think an aero screen on this car would look absolutely beautiful. And I think Autosport did that. I'll see if I can find an image and put it up on screen. But that car looks absolutely amazing. So yeah, it probably won't be for 2021, but maybe 2022, 2023, we could see something like an aero screen or a canopy being put on these cars. And I think that would look a lot nicer than what we have at the moment. So if we look towards the rear then, before I get onto that massive diffuser, let's talk about the rear wing. Now, someone said it looks a little bit like they've turned our current rear wings inside out. And it does look a little bit odd. Obviously, we've got the end plates have been shortened massively. So it now doesn't stick above the elements of the rear wing. It just sort of meets the elements of the rear wing. It feels like one big piece. No sign of DRS on that car as well, which is interesting. I wonder if that's something that they just haven't added there, or whether they are planning on getting rid of DRS for 2021. It would be interesting. I think it's also quite a risk as well. Obviously, they thought the regulations of 2019 would improve overtaking massively, and it hasn't really worked. Obviously, this is a lot more radical, but I do worry it could be a risk getting rid of DRS straight away as we go into these regulations. The safer option, have it for 2021, and if overtakes are fantastic, then maybe consider taking it away, but just double check. I'm not a massive fan of DRS, but I am a massive fan of overtaking, so whatever will give us the more overtaking, the better, really. So with further look to the rear, then you can see from this sort of rear shot that it does look like the rear wing is more or less one big piece this year. And again, I can't see the DRS working at all because there's no end plate really for that wing to flick up on. Also, doesn't look like they'll be able to change slot gaps very easily. So could be interesting to see how setups are affected. We could even see multiple rear wings, multiple setups. It won't just be adjusting one rear wing, take one rear wing off, put another rear wing on throughout a weekend, which could be very interesting. Now, the diffuser is massive and I love it. It looks fantastic. Lots of flicks on the back, especially on the outward sections. Yeah, looking very, very nice. That's what I'm really going to say there. Another thing to note is that these cars do look a little bit narrower than our current generation of Formula One cars. And I know that maybe that's just a scale model of sort of warping my perspective of it, but it does look like the 2019 cars are a little bit wider than these ones. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Part of the reason we haven't got any overtaking this year is because the cars are so wide. And obviously the tracks, places like Baku, for example, has really, really narrow sections. I think also you've got the new race in the Netherlands, which is a very, very tight and twisty circuit. And in the early 2000s, when the cars were a lot narrower, that'd be fine. But with the wide cars that we're going to see this year and next year, I do worry for the overtaking over there. So this could be a solution. Again, it might just be the perspective of the car being warped because it's obviously a 50% scale model that they put in this wind tunnel. But you never know. And if they did make the cars narrower, I wouldn't be against that. But my overall thoughts then are very, very positive, and I'm really looking forward to this. Again, the only thing I'm a little bit uncomfortable with is that little flick over the over the tyres at the front of the car. But the rest of it I do really like, and especially I've seen this head-on view for the first time and I absolutely love it. I think that car looks stunning, even with the halo, to be honest. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to 2021. Obviously these regulations could change, so take everything I've said today with a pinch of salt, but it's very, very interesting. So yeah. But if you have any differing opinions to me, please let me know down in the comments below. It'd be really interesting to hear what you guys think of this 2021 spec car. Obviously, lots of things could still change, so let me know what you would like to see different. Is there any part of the car which you think could be changed in any way? If so, let me know down in the comments. And of course, don't forget to like, comment, and of course, subscribe as well. That's all from me today. I will see you guys in the next one.